governance-first SharePoint information architecture for large enterprises. Microsoft Purview could not govern a SharePoint environment that was never architected to be governed. Retention policies, sensitivity labels, access controls, provisioning standards, and audit reporting all depend on the same foundation: a SharePoint architecture that defines where content belongs, who owns it, and how it should be governed. Without that foundation, governance becomes a set of policies sitting on top of a platform that grew in every direction at once. It usually does not start with a major failure. It starts with flexible collaboration. A project team creates a site because they need a place to work. A department creates a library because they need to share documents. A business unit creates a workspace because the old one no longer fits how they operate. Each decision makes sense in isolation, but over time, those decisions create a SharePoint environment where content boundaries are unclear, ownership is inconsistent, metadata varies by site, and retention policies cannot be applied reliably. That is not just an organization problem. It is a governance problem. If legal asks for every document tied to a project, IT needs to know where that content lives. If compliance needs evidence that retention policies were applied, the architecture needs to support that reporting. If security needs to verify access to sensitive content, ownership boundaries need to be clear enough for review. And if users cannot tell whether something belongs in Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, a publishing site, or a records repository, content will scatter across the Microsoft 365 environment. Once that happens, even sophisticated governance tools have limits. Microsoft Purview can apply retention and sensitivity policies. SharePoint Advanced Management can support provisioning and access controls. Entra ID can enforce identity and permission models. But those tools work best when the architecture gives them a consistent structure to govern. They cannot fix years of unclear site ownership, mixed content types, inconsistent metadata, overlapping permissions, and ad hoc provisioning by themselves. That is the mistake many organizations make. They treat SharePoint information architecture as a design exercise. It is not. Information architecture is the control layer that makes governance enforceable. The first architectural decision is content separation. Collaboration spaces, publishing spaces, and record spaces have different purposes. They should not be treated as the same kind of SharePoint site. Collaboration spaces need flexibility. Project teams need to create, edit, iterate, and work quickly. Permissions may change as the project changes. Content may be active for a shorter period of time. Publishing spaces are different. They usually need controlled authoring, broader read access, formal approval, and version discipline. The content is meant to be consumed by a wider audience. So accuracy, review, and consistency matter more than rapid iteration. Record spaces are different again. They need stricter access control, retention enforcement, immutability where required, and complete evidence trails. The goal is not collaboration speed. The goal is defensibility. When those three content types are mixed into the same structural model, governance becomes much harder to enforce. A project document, a published policy, and an official record may sit beside each other with different access needs, different lifecycle requirements, and different compliance obligations. That is how retention policies become inconsistent. That is how access reviews become confusing. That is how users lose confidence in where content belongs. The second architectural decision is hub alignment. Hub sites should reflect real business boundaries, not historical accidents or IT convenience. Finance, HR, legal, operations, and other business functions have different ownership models, access needs, retention requirements, and compliance obligations. When hubs align to real business accountability, governance becomes easier to enforce. Site owners understand the content. Approval paths are clearer. Access reviews have a business context. Retention rules can be applied based on the kind of work happening inside that hub. When hubs do not align to the business, governance becomes manual interpretation. IT has to decide who owns the content, which policy applies, and whether a site belongs to one function or another. That does not scale across hundreds or thousands of sites. The third architectural decision is metadata and content type standardization. Search, workflow, retention, and compliance reporting all depend on predictable classification. If every site uses different document names, different templates, different metadata fields, and different folder structures, automation has very little to work with. Standardized content types give the platform a common language. A contract, policy, project plan, invoice, engineering drawing, or HR record should not be defined differently in every department. When content types are designed at the hub level and inherited by member sites, governance becomes more consistent. Metadata does not need to be excessive. It needs to be intentional. The right fields allow documents to be routed, retained, found, labeled, and reported on, without relying entirely on users to remember where everything belongs. The fourth architectural decision is provisioning control. Self-service site creation without architecture creates sprawl. Every new site becomes a new governance decision. Who owns it? What type of content belongs there? Which labels apply? What retention rules apply? What happens when the project ends? Provisioning should answer those questions at creation. Templates should apply naming standards, default permissions, metadata schemas, sensitivity labels, retention policies, navigation, and ownership requirements before the site goes live. That is how architecture becomes enforceable. Governance is no longer something IT tries to retrofit later. It is embedded into the way new spaces are created. The fifth architectural decision is Microsoft 365 alignment. SharePoint does not exist by itself. Teams, OneDrive, Exchange, Microsoft Purview, Entra ID, and Power Platform all influence how content is created, shared, stored, governed, and retained. Users need clear boundaries. Teams is usually where active collaboration happens. SharePoint is where departmental publishing, structured storage, and governed content management happen. OneDrive is for individual drafts and personal work products. If that model is not clear, users will make their own decisions, and governance will fragment. The same is true for Purview alignment. Sensitivity labels and retention policies work best when hub structures, site templates, metadata, and content boundaries support them. If a site contains multiple content types with different retention needs and different sensitivity profiles, automated governance becomes harder to apply reliably. Implementation should start with evidence, not assumptions. Before designing the target architecture, assess the current environment. Map hubs, sites, libraries, permissions, content types, metadata, ownership gaps, and provisioning patterns. That current state assessment shows where governance is already breaking down. It identifies where collaboration, publishing, and records content are mixed together. It shows where sites lack owners, where metadata is inconsistent, and where permission inheritance has created review problems. From there, the target architecture can be designed around the actual environment. Define the hub model, separate content spaces, standardize metadata and content types, establish provisioning controls, align the architecture to Purview, Teams, OneDrive, and broader Microsoft 365 governance. Then prove the model in one business unit before expanding. A pilot hub gives the organization a controlled way to test ownership, metadata, provisioning, access, retention, and user adoption under real working conditions. After 30 years of integrating Microsoft systems for mid to large enterprises and regulated industries, we have learned that SharePoint governance does not fail because organizations lack policies. It fails when the architecture gives those policies nowhere reliable to attach. Read the full article before finalizing your SharePoint architecture. It explains how hub design, content boundaries, metadata standards, provisioning controls, Purview, Teams, and OneDrive all need to work together for governance to hold. SharePoint governance does not start with the policy. It starts with the structure the policy has to govern.